Seriously, you've got to love the experimental nature of the PlayStation and even the consoles of that generation during the 90s. They presented many interesting ideas and concepts, many of which would set the stage and the foundations for everything that we now see today. Even though a lot of the games that were released during this time probably didn't get the greatest of reception due to a variety of different reasons, either from gameplay mechanics or just clunky gameplay and just obscure ideas, many of which leaving people unsure of what was really going on. But even at that, people a lot of times struggle to adapt to these concepts. But in later years, we have become to adore these games and even found a new level of respect for them. Yes, they're not perfect, but do they really need to be? That's the big question. And if we look at games like Deathtrap Dungeon here that was released in 1998 for both the PlayStation and the Windows PC, and the concept of the game is based off of a game book of the same name that was written by the legendary Ian Livingstone. During the game's development, it would utilise a similar 3D engine to that seen in the Tomb Raider series, and the game would also play from a third-person action-adventure perspective, but allowing you to play as two individual characters, all with their own traits and unique quirks, either with a female character under the name of Red Lotus or the barbarian character known as Chain Dog, who after receiving an invitation from a wizard goes to explore a series of dungeons in which they must overcome many monsters and traps and loads of dangers in order to achieve and acquire the riches that lie within. But the one thing that is apparent is that anyone that has ventured into these dungeons have never come back alive. So now it is your turn to see if you can acquire what nobody else could achieve. Ian Livingstone himself was heavily involved with the development of the game, mainly with the game's level design and art style, as he took a lot of inspiration from an Italian artist with its dark, dingy environments that really suited the overall aura of the game. As yes, this is an action-adventure game, but it also has elements of horror in it because there's a lot of blood, guts, gore, everything in between. The game is very atmospheric, make no mistake about that, with loads of different elements from being able to solve puzzles, try and find loads of hidden secrets, acquire new weapons, magical abilities, potions, so that you can utilise spells, healing items, and use any number of purposes that will help you in order to progress and survive. While the game does have a lot of traits, and with the game during its development would also have been under the same format as other Tomb Raider games that were developed in and around the same time, it was often compared to the Tomb Raider games, which didn't help its reviews, because it has a very similar graphical style, but it's a lot darker in its tone. And the game across both platforms, both the PlayStation and the PC, would receive mixed to average reviews at best, stating that they did like the idea behind the game and it was well designed to a certain degree, but certain elements regarding the controls, even some of the difficulty spikes, would definitely present a serious challenge and even frustrate some players. Now you could save the game at different points, which was definitely a must, because this game, like, make no mistake, it is a very, very tough and challenging game, and you will find yourself dying a lot and restarting from checkpoints or even at the start of the level or even the game if you're not careful. But it is a solid and playable example of games that were being developed around that time, regardless of the reviews. While it's not the best example, it definitely brought enough to it that had some interesting concepts that you won't see anywhere else. If anything, reviewers stated at the time, if you're really interested in playing the game, it is definitely best to rent it out for a weekend and at least give it a good go. Like, even when I look back at it myself, my first experience with this was on a demo that came with one of the monthly UK PlayStation magazines. And I have to say now, I really enjoyed it. Yes, the controls are clunky. It kind of mixes a different dynamic between tank controls and just, it tries to be a bit of everything but doesn't execute it in the way that you'd like. But regardless of the fiddliness of those elements, I found the game to be very enjoyable. Yes, time consuming, challenging, frustrating. There's a lot of trial and error because you'll find yourself, like I said, you will die a lot. There are certain elements moments where you think you're in a safe zone to hit a switch thinking that you can open a door, and you go into somewhere only to be met with a trap inside the room that you didn't see, and sure, you're gone instantly. And let's just put it this way, the death sequences in this game are extremely gruesome, both for the enemies and for the characters themselves. Like, you will literally be obliterated, body parts just flying everywhere, which is insane. That's to say, the level of violence and grotesque nature of this game is mental. It really is. But it's also one of the game's highlight points, as one of the things it does get right is, yes, the level of gore is at an all-time high, but it does definitely get the atmosphere, because even the background music suits the environments that you end up in, because they're very dark and dingy with dimly lit rooms and even very low lighting in most cases, that you can't really see where you are until an enemy is almost on top of you. Plus you have to contend with loads of environmental hazards and traps. And even with the demo, you got to play one of the early levels in the game, and in fairness to it, there was a lot of replayability in it, because as there was loads of areas to explore with a few different secrets, and that's what made it even more appealing. Just, you wouldn't finish the demo on your first try or even first attempt. It would take quite a few tries, and every attempt you would get a little bit further, and then you would lose the plot or die, and then you'd have to play it again. But the one thing I really liked about it is that it had enough unique appeal that by the time I sat down and played it enough, I found myself being more drawn into it, to a later point that when the game was released, we did rent it out for a weekend, and we definitely put a good bit of time into it. Mind you, it was very, very hard to get past some of the levels, even early on, because some of the challenges and even the puzzles are not as easily apparent to figure out in the beginning, and will take a lot of trial and error in order to succeed. But regardless of the reviews, yes, it's a clunky and tough title, but it is a solid game for what it does try to do. It is a solid experience. If you like horror and action, this is definitely the place to go. It's not the best game of its type on the PlayStation, but it's definitely a game worth trying out. Absolutely. It has enough unique quirks about it, even with regards to horror elements, with tension, atmosphere, ambience, dark and gritty themes. There is definitely a lot of appealing factors here that will cater to a lot of those horror fans, that's for sure. But I have to say, it's one that I would definitely recommend that you try out. And I would love to know your thoughts of Deathtrap Dungeon. What did you think of it overall? Do you think that this would be classed as an underrated gem on the PlayStation? Did you play it yourself, or did you even play it on a demo like I did? And what did you think of it overall? So be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you would like to see more content around other quirky games like Deathtrap Dungeon that was also released on the PlayStation, then be sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like on the video. And you can also check out this playlist here to see a lot more of those games in action. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.